Hello, my name is Paul Mount. Welcome to my world of stuff. It's time for another retro movie review. I'm taking you back to 1976. We're going to go on Logan's Run. Logan's Run from 1976 is a proper science fiction film. A good old-fashioned, well-written, well-produced, visually very stylish science fiction film, which came out the year before Star Wars. And I think that's one of the reasons why, although it's well regarded in the science fiction cinematic canon, it's not remembered very well. I think people who've seen it and see it now are impressed by it and how good it is visually and from a narrative perspective. But I think that Star Wars changed the direction of science fiction, made it perhaps a little more kiddie friendly than it had been. Because in the 70s, we didn't have the rush of science fiction films you get these days. You know, every week there seems to be a new science fiction film or fantasy extravaganza or something of that nature appearing in the multiplexes. But back then, it was a bit more of a rarity. You had things like Planet of the Apes in the 60s and the films that followed it. You had Soylent Green, your Omega Man, Silent Running. And then you had Logan's Run, which came out in 76 as a proper adult story about humanity and the possible future for humanity. The story, for those of you who have not seen the film, I recommend that you pick it up because it's available on this rather nice little Steelbook Blu-ray edition, which you might recall I opened up on the last physical media video, which I think went Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. It's about 10 quid, so I pick it up quickly. This is set in the 23rd century in the aftermath of nuclear war, which has ravaged the planet, and the survivors of the human race, generations later, live in these series of geodesic domes near the coastline, where they live this very hedonistic lifestyle, where everything that they do is predicated upon pleasure and enjoyment and relaxation. Machines do everything. All their physical needs are met, as it were. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And the only downside to all this is that everybody has these crystals embedded into their palms. And when they approach 30, the crystals start to glow red, which means they have to attend a process known as carousel, which is a sort of a gladiatorial type arena where people who've been chosen line up around the arena. The rest of the population cheer and watch and scream in support as they're lifted up into the air, where they're vaporized. However, the concept is known as the possibility of renewal. People may die, but they may be renewed. They may live again. But of course, in actual fact, it's a way of keeping the population down by destroying anybody who gets to 30. Policing this are the Sandmen. They're black-clad police sort of security officers who chase down runners, who are people who don't fancy taking their chances with the carousel and they try and go on the run to the mythical sanctuary. The runners, including the lead character Logan 5, played by Michael York, they hunt down the runners and dispense their own form of justice, which is pretty grisly. Logan 5, in his downtime, he meets up with Jenny Agguter's Jessica, ostensibly for pleasure purposes, but it turns out that she's signed up to the circuit, as it's called, by mistake. But she's really more concerned with the idea of sanctuary that she's heard about, where people escape from the city and find another society where they don't have to be vaporized or renewed at the age of 30. Eventually, for various plot complexities I won't go into here, Logan finds himself teaming up with Jessica to flee the city, where they find that outside the domes, life on Earth is rather different than they might have expected. This is a great film. I've not seen this film for decades. It's a pleasure to watch it again last night on the big screen. It's on Blu-ray. It's a bit grainy to start with. The picture's slightly grainy, but it becomes very sharp and it's very colourful. And it's one of those films that it's so engrossing in terms of the story and the way it's written. It's such a good script. It's very literate and very visual. And it's worlds away from what science fiction will become just a year or so later, in the wake of Star Wars, when it became much more robots and spaceships fighting in space. This is more about, I hate to say the cliche, but it is very much about what it means to be human and how humanity thrives and survives even in the direst circumstances. Visually, it's very, very impressive. The effects are superb. I mean, it starts off with what is a very obvious model shot of the domed cities, but it's done very well. It's quite Jerry Anderson in a way, because you've got little monorails and little machines moving around, and they've overlaid in the walkway areas people walking along. So it's very convincing. And I was looking at this blown up on the 100-inch screen, thinking, wow, this really holds up. You couldn't look at this today and go, this terrible visual effect, because it still looks really good. And there's lots of optical effects, there's lots of matte effects. I think there were some quite revolutionary camera techniques used to bring this world to the screen. And it looks great. It really looks very, very good. And I think sometimes it proves that maxim that less is a bit more. You don't need all the bang and flash that we get in today's modern crazy visual effects extravaganzas if you've got a good story to tell. And this has a really good story to tell. It really comes alive in those scenes when Logan sort of turns his back on the salmon and tries to escape the city. When they get outside, there are some really nice, very well put together matte shots of them. They travel to the ruins of Washington, so you get the Washington Tower in the distance, and the whole countryside is covered in vegetation. The city's being overwhelmed. They get to the Lincoln Memorial, and that's just covered in vines and creeping grasses and things. And it's all done with matte shots, but it's beautifully done with the characters overlaid onto it. It's really very, very impressive. All that sort of stuff is, press of a button stuff for today's CGI artists, but so brilliantly and very evocative and quite chilling to see these scenes when they're walking through deserted streets and overgrown, buildings and things. We then meet Peter Ustinov, who plays an old man. Now, of course, the idea of an old man is completely foreign to these people, and it's so well played by both Michael York and Jenny Agguter when they meet Peter Ustinov, who's got this craggy face and this huge beard, and she tries to explain to them about being old. They've got no conception of this, because to them, people are renewed at 30. So they've never seen an old person before. And they play it so well with this real sense of awe. It's seeing somebody, and he lives with cats. And it's quite quirky, and it's a slightly different aesthetic to the one we've seen before. Much more grounded when we are reintroduced to the concepts of what we understand to be humanity. The concepts of, at one point they pass through a graveyard, and they see tombstones with, beloved husband, beloved. They don't understand those concepts of that sort of unity of relationship. And it's played very, very well. I think if there's a flaw, I think that they decide they have to go back to the city to try and explain what Sanctuary really is. And I think that Michael York's character sort of brings down that society a little bit too easily, just by confusing the computers with his images of what he's seen outside. And everybody flees. I mean, I'm not too bothered about spoilers for this film. It came out in 1976. But there is an ending which sort of rushes at you a bit too quickly, when it's been taking its time quite nicely and explaining its world and introducing its world and showing you its world. And all of a sudden that world is gone, which we knew was going to happen because it's that sort of film. But I thoroughly enjoyed watching this again last night. It's a really well put together, well directed and well written film with great performances. I mean, Michael York was a great actor in his time. He was very popular in the 70s and 80s. I think he does or has done in more recent times a lot of voice work for various cartoon things now. And of course, Jenny Agguter, well, most of you, or many of you anyway, may know her now as one of the nuns, I think, in Call the Midwife on the BBC. I don't watch the show myself, but I know she's in the cast. And I think she's turned up in a couple of Marvel films. I think she was in Iron Man 3. But anyway, she's still working. And it's just great to see them sort of in their prime in this really, really good proper science fiction story, which I thoroughly enjoyed watching again. And as I say, it's available on Blu-ray. I'm sure you can find it online, some of the usual streamers or something. But it gets from me a big mighty 8.5 out of 10. A cracking, proper old school science fiction film that I suggest you track down as soon as you can. Right, hope you've enjoyed this video, whether you've subscribed or whether you've just stumbled across this and thought, oh, this bloke's vaguely interesting. Why not like and subscribe? Leave a comment down below if you've seen Logan's Run. Let me know what you thought of it. And I shall do another retro movie review very soon. But until I do, and until I'm back for some more, just keep taking the stuff.